All right, let's dive into the world of the digital detectives. We're talking about information systems auditing, a super important job that most people have never even heard of. These are the folks who make sure our digital world is running the way it's supposed to, securely, effectively, and, honestly. So let's get our investigation started.
I mean, think about it. This is the big question, right? Everything we do, every purchase, every message, it all runs on code we can't see. So how in the world do we know it's all on the level? Well, that's exactly the problem IS auditing is here to solve.
So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll talk about why we even need these digital detectives. Then, we'll look at their step-by-step blueprint for an investigation. After that, we'll get into the clues they look for: evidence, risk, and controls. We'll check out their cool high-tech toolkit, and finally, see how they deliver their final verdict.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Why is this job so important? What's the point of it all?
An IS audit is so much more than just a boring technical checkup. Really, you should think of it like a full-blown investigation. It's a deep dive into an organization's technology. Everything from their servers to their software, to make sure it's not only working right, but that it's also locked down tight and following all the rules.
And that's really the heart of it. The whole reason for doing this is to give everyone, from the CEO down to the customer, that feeling of confidence that the systems they depend on every single day are safe. It all comes down to building and keeping that trust.
Now, these digital detectives don't just wing it. They follow a really strict set of rules laid out by a global organization called ISACA. ISACA is the one providing the training, the exams, the certifications, basically all the standards that make sure every single IS auditor is a pro you can rely on.
Okay, so we know who these detectives are. Now let's look at how they actually run an investigation. It turns out every single audit follows a really clear, structured plan.
And this isn't just some casual suggestion either. This process is so critical that it makes up a whopping 18% of the CISA exam. That's the gold standard certification in this field. So yeah, if you want to be an auditor, you've got to know this process inside and out.
So the whole thing breaks down into 4 really logical steps. First, you've got planning. What are we actually looking at here? What's in, what's out? Then comes the field work. This is the classic detective stuff, digging for evidence, testing the security systems. Third is reporting, where you clearly lay out what you found. And finally, and this is key, follow-up, because finding a problem is great, but you have to make sure it actually gets fixed. Okay, so when we talk about that fieldwork phase, what are auditors really looking for? Well, it all boils down to the core of the investigation, understanding risks and checking the controls. So controls is the word they use for all the different safeguards a company has. The best way to think about it is to go back to our detective analogy. Controls are the digital locks on the doors, the virtual security cameras watching the network, and the official rulebook everyone's supposed to follow. An auditor's job is to go and check if those locks are strong and if people are actually following the rules.
And it turns out these controls come in a few different flavors. You've got preventative controls, which are like a big, strong lock on the door. They're designed to stop something bad from ever happening. Then you have detective controls. They're like a security alarm. They won't stop the break-in, but they'll sure let you know it's happening. And last, you've got corrective controls, which is your plan to clean up the mess, like restoring your files from a backup. Any good, secure system needs a mix of all 3.
Auditors also look at controls from 2 different angles. There are general controls. These are the big picture, foundational things. We're talking about stuff like the physical security of the building where the servers are, or the company-wide plan for what to do in a disaster. Then there are application controls, which are way more specific. They live inside one program, like a rule in the payroll system that says you can't approve your own raise.
So you can't be a modern detective without a modern toolkit, right? The days of just using a paper checklist are long gone. Technology has totally changed how these investigations get done.
The number one tool in their arsenal is something called CATS. It's a bit of a mouthful. It stands for Computer Assisted Audit Techniques. But basically, it's special software that's like a high-tech forensics kit. It lets auditors blast through millions of transactions and system records in a tiny fraction of the time it would take a person to do it.
And this is where it gets really powerful. Instead of just spot checking a few things, these tools let an auditor analyze every single transaction, 100% of them. They can automatically find weird patterns that might be fraud, check for weak spots in the system setup, and make sure all the numbers add up. It makes the whole audit incredibly thorough.
But of course, the technology doesn't stop there. Just as everyone got used to these amazing tools, a new one is showing up that's even more powerful: artificial intelligence.
What AI is doing is shifting auditing from being reactive to being predictive. Instead of just finding problems that already happened, AI can help predict risks before they become problems. It can watch systems 24/7, not just once a year. And it can find these super complex, subtle patterns of bad behavior that a human would probably miss. This is absolutely the future.
All right, so after all the planning, all the fieldwork, all the high-tech analysis, the investigation is finally winding down. It's time to deliver the final verdict and, most importantly, make sure it leads to some real change.
And this is such a critical point. A good audit report isn't about pointing fingers or just making a list of everything that's wrong. A great report is a constructive tool. It's a roadmap that tells the organization, here are the exact steps you can take to get stronger and more secure.
This final stage is handled really carefully. The auditor writes up their findings, they sit down with management to talk it through and make sure everyone's on the same page, and then they issue the official report. But look at that last step, follow-up. The job isn't over until the auditor comes back later to make sure those problems actually got fixed.
And that really says it all, doesn't it? The whole philosophy here is about making things better over time. It's a cycle. The goal isn't just to find mistakes, it's to build systems that are tougher, more reliable, and more trustworthy for all of us.
Which, of course, leaves us with a huge, mind-bending question for the future. As we start letting AI manage more and more of our critical systems, who's going to be in charge of auditing the AI? Who watches the watcher? That is the next big case for our digital detectives to solve.